Oh, loads of people. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see so many people waiting. My name's Marie, for those of you that don't know me, and we'll be starting the meeting at 10, but we'll just give time for other people to join. Thank you, Ephanuel. Hi, Helen. It is nice if you it's nice if you start with your cameras on, and then I know there really are people there and not just kind of blobs staring at me. Thank you.
Good morning,
Yeah,
everybody.
Morning. Yeah, that's good. Because otherwise I kind of feel like I'm talking into the ether and there's nobody there.
We're here.
Yeah, good.
And good morning.
Good morning to you, Nyasha.
Morning.
Morning, Samu. If I mispronounce your names, tell me so that I get it right. Oh, thank you, Owen. Okay, just got a few minutes. So have any of you been watching the football? Yeah. Did you see the Cape Verde goalkeeper last night?
I'm from Cape Verde. Hello.
Hey, Nadia. I bet you were over the moon, weren't you? What a result.
Amazing.
Yeah. Was it the population there is the same size as Sheffield, isn't it? And to get a team together to draw with Spain, it was just best match so far, I think.
England is playing today, isn't it?
Pardon?
England should be playing today. Oh, tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Yeah.
The Cape Verde match was like the best 0-0 I've ever watched. It was so entertaining.
Yeah. One of the things I love about football, it really does bring the whole world together because we can talk and share. Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Joseph.
Good morning.
I bought myself a new TV for the World Cup, but I've had about 20 minutes worth of device time because my youngest has decided it's her TV now. So.
Oh, quickly, before we start, you know, the government is going to be bringing in banning under 16s on social media from next year. Having worked in children's homes and been involved in children's homes for a long time, I know that for our children, you know, we put times on when we're going to turn it off at night and all that kind of thing. But I potentially see huge battles coming up in children's homes all across the country, not just in our homes, as it were, with our own children, but in our children's homes. Is this something that you would want us to look at and mentor and try to come up with some tips and try to come up with information in advance for you?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're saying that it's going to be by December, by sort of Christmas, they'll have more of a plan, but it won't be coming. You can tell I got up early this morning to have a look at it and see exactly what it's. Yeah, Owen, I think you're right. He's saying it's going to be on the job learning for this one. But I think it's whatever we can do to support each other with this. I think it's going to be really important. But that's something we'll definitely look at and share with you.
Yeah. But I read a report yesterday that they're saying that YouTube, the most used thing on YouTube is CBBCs.
Yeah.
That's the most downloaded thing on YouTube is CBBCs, the little ones and their pushchairs. So do you know what I mean? It's going to affect everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think we perhaps need to talk with some teenagers about how they would like to see it being and the sort of blocks that they would put in, because they'll know how to get round the back of it. So we need to learn from them how they do it so that we can prevent that. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. It's quite a few of you here already. So I think we'll get going. I'm really conscious of the fact that I've referred to Reg 40 throughout this. I know that that's not the case for supported accommodation. I know that's 27. But if you read the regulation and if you read the quality standards, it's the same wording. And so I'm just going to do it in that way. You will get a copy of the presentation afterwards. So those of you that like to take notes, take your notes, but you don't have to write down all of the bits because you're going to get the presentation with everything put into place for you. And
I've just sent you the list there. Okay, look.
Okay. And what we'll do is you can keep your cameras on while we're here, which is great. Then I can still sort of see you. We can see each other. If you're not muted, mute yourself. But there's going to be a couple of times when I'll ask for your input so that and then unmute at that time. Does that feel okay with everyone? Yep. The other thing is today with Mentor, this is the first time we've done Teams to do a webinar. So this is new for us. And those of you that have been to my sessions before know I'm a little bit of a dodo. And so it takes me a while how to work out technology. And this is another new one. So if I suddenly disappear, Liam is here and he will sort of get me back. Right. So I'm now going to share my screen. Browse my computer. Open. Replace. Okay, have you all got that? Can you all see notification to Ofsted and police involvement?
Yes.
Yeah.
Magic. Good.
Yes.
Can breathe again now.
Yes.
Okay, Sandra, thank you for letting us know. So a lot of the early stuff, the early slides, is stuff that you will already know. But I don't think it hurts. Thank you, Jennifer. I don't think it hurts to repeat that and make sure that everybody's clear on it, because it is in the body of the standards and the regs, but it can be confusing. So Reg 40 or 27 in supported accommodation. The intention of actually having this is so that you as providers will only share information with Ofsted as the regulator about the most serious incidents. Most of you know I used to work for Ofsted, and when I first started there years ago, notifiable diseases and infections had to be notified to Ofsted as well. And I got so many notifications about chickenpox. But they changed that over the years, I think, especially following COVID, because there's just so many notifications coming in. So in October 2023, Ofsted updated exactly how they wanted notifications to come in, what you should be saying and how you should be doing it. And when the supported accommodation regulations came into being, the same terminology was used. And so we don't need to repeat that. And Ofsted have stated that by doing it this way, it should have reduced the number of notifications you're required to send to them. However, the number have continued to increase, and many of the notifications received do not fall into the category of serious. And so we're going to look at what are serious, what aren't, and how you can interpret that, not only to safeguard your children, but to safeguard you. Because I know it can be horribly confusing when you think, they definitely need to know about this and you send it, and they didn't need to know about it. Or worse still, you think they won't want to know about this one, so you don't tell them. Then they turn up on inspection and say, why didn't you tell us about this? So it's about making that clear for you, hopefully. So what you should report, okay? Sections 1 to 3 of the regulation are really clear. So if any of the following, sometimes they're called incidents, notifications, or events, it depends on how you record it, you must notify. So obviously if a child dies, if you've reported someone under the Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act, so if you've had a concern about a safeguarding issue to do with a member of your staff or another professional that you've had contact with, that your child has had contact with, that you've reported, they want to know about that. A serious incident with a child that required police involvement, an abuse allegation against the home or someone working there, if a child protection inquiry has started or concluded, and we'll look at that in more detail. And this is the one that confuses a lot of people. Any other incident relating to a child which the registered person considers serious. So whether or not you think it's serious. And I know that some of the categories can be open to interpretation. So we're going to look at those in more detail. Martin, you cannot hear. Can everybody else hear? I can see you,
Yes.
Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I hear you?
Martin, is your microphone bit at the top? Yeah, there's thumbs coming up and so this is really good. Is there a button at the top of your screen that's got a little cross on it where the microphone is? You try clicking that. Oh, there's others. I'm not sure why. I've got the sound all the way up and most people can hit. Oh, I can see that you're mute. Try unmuting yourself. That might do it. I don't know. Liam, what do you think?
Try to leave and then come back.
Okay. I'm going to carry on because it is being recorded.
Sign up for it.
I signed up for it.
Okay, so check your email. Yeah, so.
Someone my email that I haven't seen.
Okay. So when should you report? If one of those things have happened, when should you report? Obviously, if a child dies, immediately. As soon as you're aware, you put your notification in. And all other incident reports should be made without delay and where possible within 24 hours. However, in situations where you need to gather further information, Ofsted recognise this may take more than 24 hours. The reality is you could have a situation where a child, for example, has been arrested and they are in custody and you're going down to the police station to support them. You're trying to work out what you need to do with them. Are you the appropriate adult? Have you got a member of staff, the appropriate adult? It's finding out exactly what's going to be happening with them. And that could take you over the 24 hours. Leave it till that's finished. As long as you say clearly why it's gone longer than 24 hours that you've notified, it makes more sense to Ofsted because then you can give them the so what has happened with the child. Don't be hogtied into thinking, oh, I've got to do it by 11 o'clock tonight because he was arrested by 11 o'clock last night, because it may be that the next morning is better because it gives you the full picture of what has been happening. But make sure it's clear in your notification why it's gone past the 24 hours. Part of the reason why I say that is your Ofsted record will automatically update when you submit your report. I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Ofsted, every single children's home supported accommodation manager, all of you have got like an electronic filing cabinet. And so under your URN for your home, when you send in a Reg 40 or a 27, or for example, your Reg 44 or Reg 45 report, the Ofsted reports that they write, they all go into that electronic filing cabinet. And so when you send in a notification, they're starting to tot up, if you like, the number of notifications that you make. And so they keep a record of how many there are, how many have there been, and the kind they've been, because that helps them to look at what is happening in a home. Do they need to come out more quickly to do an inspection? Can they perhaps leave inspecting you till the end of the cycle because there are no concerns? And so the number starts to tot up once you put the notification in. Completing the form. Now, most of you, I would imagine, have completed a form, so you know how to do this. Is there anyone, because I don't want to talk through things that we don't necessarily need to, is there anyone who has never completed a Reg 40 and are not sure how to do it?
I haven't completed one.
Okay. So the form is on the system. Is that you, Yash? Yeah, hi. Okay, so the form is on the system. We also have it on Mentor, which makes life a lot easier for you. You don't have to download it, it's there for you. So make sure that you put on there what your URN is, and make that clear. The type of incident. So it could be a child. You don't have to do if they're like dysregulated, and you don't have to do every time they're missing. But if you've got serious concerns about them being missing, yeah, serious concerns about a child being missing, then you put that in. And there is a drop-down box so you can tick what it is, what your type of incident is. Your contact details. So make it clear who it is that's completing the form and the details of your service and the relevant member of staff. Doesn't have to be an essay, just what those points are. So it's really clear who's completed the form, because sometimes a staff member may complete it over a weekend when you're not there as managers, if they've had the training and they know how to do it. But make sure that they've got their details on there so you can see who has completed it and what's happened, when and where the incident happened. So say, for example, I'm thinking of a situation recently in one of our homes in the kitchen, where a young person became dysregulated. And while they were trying to sort of calm him down, he picked up a utensil and went for a member of staff with it. So it was in the kitchen. And the details were that just in a split second, he picked up this utensil. Details of any child involved in the initials of all staff involved. So if you have a situation in another home, when I was an inspector, there was a situation where there were peers, two teenage brothers living in the house, and they quite often went for each other. And on this occasion, it was a really serious assault between the two of them. They were really going for each other, and the staff were jumping in and pulling them out. So there was the full details of the start of the two young people, the two brothers, but also the initials of all of the staff involved and what their role was and what they did. The registered person's evaluation of the incident and actions taken. And this is really, really important that you put in as the registered person. So the manager, if they're overseeing what the staff did, if the manager themselves was involved, the RI's evaluation of what the incident was. Did they do the right thing? Are there any lessons learned, and what's going to be happening next? It's the so what. So what's been the impact of the incident, and what are you doing next to prevent it happening again? You know, the box where it says steps to be taken, what you're going to be doing next. You can literally put in there things like updating behaviour support plan, updating care plan, updating risk assessment. But if you put that in, make sure that you do that. Because, for example, when I was an inspector and I looked at Reg 40s, in my pre-planning for inspections, I would always look at the 40s to see if there'd been a major, what the incidents were. And if they said they were updating, that would be one of my key lines of inquiry. So when I went to do the inspection, I would look up, okay, did they update the risk assessment? Did they update the behaviour support plan as a result of that incident? What did they learn from that? And did that enable the child to learn and the staff to learn so that these things wouldn't be repeated? And if you've informed any other relevant people or organisation, such as the Secretary of State, Placing Authority, or relevant local authority, You would only need to inform the Secretary of State if a child has died. So don't worry about that one at this time. But if you have informed the placing authority or your local authority, so if you've talked to, very often our children come from outside the area. So we need to inform the social worker for the placing authority. And if there's been links with the local authority, because maybe the incident took place in the community or involved children from the community, you inform the local authority as well. With children that are on a Section 20, we have to keep their parents informed. So it may be that we've also informed the parent. So if a child has been taken to hospital, if they've been arrested, if they've been injured, you inform the parent as well, because they share the care. Is that okay at this point? Yeah, good. Oh, thank you. Good. So, but remember, notification should be evaluative and not merely a chronology of events. So you can do like a bullet point, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. But then when you as the manager come in to have a look at it, you say, yeah, this happened. This is why. This is what we did as a result. And this is what we're going to be doing moving forward. I call it the so what. So what have you done as a result of what's happened that's going to make a difference for that child? Because what you want to do is make sure that you're answering any questions that not only Ofsted may have, but somebody else looking in before they have them. Okay, updates. And this can get confusing. How often do we update Ofsted about what's been happening? Because remember, they tot up the notifications. So a significant number of the notifications received by Ofsted are updates to previous incidents. And they're counted as new notifications for data purposes. And you're not required by regulation, that's not you being lazy, this is what the regulations say, to send updates to notifications. The most frequently sent updates are in relation to child protection inquiries. So what Regulation 40 says is that they require a notification when a child protection inquiry involved a child is instigated, so when it starts. And if you've done your evaluation really well, you could be saying in there, you've spoken to the social worker, you might have spoken to the IRO, you might have spoken to the team manager. There may be a case conference booked, Section 47 is it, all that kind of thing. You tell them that bit right away. And you don't have to tell them lots of notifications in between. Then you tell them when it concludes, when it ends, and what the outcome was. So you give them the beginning and you give them the end really clearly. That's what it states in regulation. If you've already reported a child protection inquiry, but you want to provide an update, say you have the relationship with your inspector, that they want to know these bits and pieces, but also they may have met the child, they want to know how they are, or you've done a good piece of work. This has worked out really well and you're really happy with how your child is, tell them, but do it with an email to your dedicated inspector. You don't have to do a notification on that. So you do it at the beginning of the child protection inquiry and at the end, instigated and concluded. There may be occasions when your inspector says, will you send an update? And that's fair enough, because they need to have an overview of what is happening. And also, a lot of the time, they really care. I mean, when I was inspecting the children in the homes I inspected, as far as I saw it, they were my kids. So I wanted to make sure that you were taking care of my children properly. And so if anything was happening with them, and whenever I went to visit, I always made a point of spending time with the children. I'd have tea with them. I'd get to know them so that they knew me as well. So if they had an issue, they could contact. So if there is an incident, inspectors want to know what's happening because they care about the children. So inspectors may ask you to send an update following a serious incident because that helps them in understanding what's happened and the action that you've taken. So what have you done as a result of it? the laddie in the kitchen, there were no knives available to him. Everything was thought it would be safe in there with him. And it was a fork, just a fork. But it was one of the, you know, the fairly long serving forks that you get, you know, you get a set of forks, don't you? And there was one that was a long serving one. He managed to grab that one and put it in the back of the staff member's hand. So it's about, what have they done about that? They've removed that as well, but they've also done some more work with him and the staff around those issues, and there hasn't been a repetition. So in those incidences, the inspector is likely to ask you to communicate by email rather than a series of further notifications, because updates are not required unless they refer to a significant development. There's no legal requirement to keep notifying Ofsted. How it works, when a notification goes into Ofsted, when you send it in to the Ofsted desk, the main desk, and there are teams of people there whose job it is to have a look at them and then put them in the file for your home, for your URN, and notify the inspector that they're there. Because you can imagine inspectors are out on inspection 2-3 days a week. So they're not looking at emails, they're not looking at all these bits. And so if you're sending the notification direct to them, they don't get to see it. So it does go into that folder, which can then be checked. Are there any questions at this point? No? Good. So obviously, I'm just going to go through some of the things they've looked at. The death of a child. I hope to God that none of you ever have this, but if you do, the form will talk you through what you need to do. It's a brief summary of the incident, the cause of death, including the date of diagnosis or time of the incident that led to the death, any treatment the child has received, and details of the hospital the child has been admitted to, if any, actions taken by staff and managers at the time. So what did you do right away? I've dealt with a few when I was an Ofsted inspector, and sort of the forms come in right away, but obviously if it's at the weekend, you don't get to see it, but notification happens because it gets picked up. Usually your line manager is rung and they will ring you. Excuse me. Safeguarding referrals. Use the form if someone in your service has been referred to the excuse me, disclosure barring service as unfit to work with children or vulnerable adults, or if they've reported someone under the Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act. And you know, the law has come in recently where it's all of our responsibilities, and if people don't record and don't report, if they feel somebody is a risk to children or vulnerable adults, you can be prosecuted as well, because we're legally responsible now, not just morally, we're both legal and moral. And again, it's a brief summary of the incident, the date you made the referral, the role of the person referred. So what was their job? Were they a care worker? Was it a caretaker? Somebody was coming into the building to do maintenance and repairs. Was it you observed, or your young person told you about an inappropriate relationship with a teacher at school? Can be any number of things, but whatever it is, what their role is, the reason for the referral. So why have you made the referral? And it could be that your young person has told you about images they've received from a teacher at school, and they're inappropriate. That's been reported to the right people, but you've done this as well. It doesn't hurt for more than one person to refer under Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act. So if the school do it, the police do it, you do it, as long as it's done. And sometimes what's happened in the past is people have assumed that somebody else would do it and it's been missed. So it's making sure that everybody does it. And again, date and reference number of any previous notification to Ofsted relating to this person. When you send in a notification, you will get an email back confirming that you've received it with a reference number. Keep a hold of that number. That will be on the record anyway, and you can put that on the system. You can put that in Mentor. Make a note of that number so that if you do have to do a follow-up, you can put the original number on so it can be found easily. And again, actions taken by you, staff and managers, and planned prevention measures. So it could be reporting. So if it had been an incident in the home, what have you done about that? Is the member of staff still working there? Do they still have access to children? If it's school, have they done something at school to make sure that that teacher is not having direct contact with children? Known or suspected sexual exploitation. Now, this one can be difficult because you can know for definite, but sometimes you can also just have a gut feeling in your tummy and there's no real evidence around this. So again, when you send your 40 in or your 27, brief summary of what the incidents are and the reasons that have led you to believe a child has been sexually exploited. Now, it could be that you've noticed they've come home from a night out wearing different clothes. They've got new things that they didn't have when they left, that they've suddenly got more money, or that people have picked them up in cars. And have you been doing things like taking down the number plate? Have you reported them missing? All those things are all tied in together that can lead you to believe a child is at risk of being sexually exploited or is being. Actions taken by staff and managers at the time and planned prevention measures. So again, that could be if a car comes to pick a child up, don't just wave them away. If you don't know who's driving that car, who they're getting into the car with, speak to them if possible. If you can't and they're about to go right down the number plate, report it. There were incidences, okay, this was years ago now, but there were incidences where people came to pick up children from a children's home. This particular home was in a big long street in the northwest, and there were 5 homes in close proximity, and the same car came to 3 of those 5 houses and picked children up, and nobody questioned it. There was no professional curiosity. We know now, and we are professionally curious, and we would challenge that. And at least one of you be taking the numbers down and you'd be talking to your opposite member of staff in one of the other children's homes. That wasn't happening then, but we've learned from that and we would be doing that now. So it's that kind of thing. Have you done any of those things? Write it down. And it's really important that you can be clear on why you think a child is or has been sexually exploited and what you were doing about it. Again, in the days when hopefully they're gone now, but there used to be the line that it was a lifestyle choice. It's not a lifestyle choice. No child asks to be like, they don't choose to be in that situation. But if they get trapped into it and professionals will look at them and saying, well, she brought it on herself, or he knew what he was doing, that puts them even more at risk. So it's about making sure that we're clear on why we're worried about this and doing something about it and making it clear what we've done. So examples of serious notifications. Okay. The guide is really clear. And it gives you examples of incidents that are likely to be considered serious. So a child being the victim or perpetrator of a serious assault. So if they've been assaulted in town or by another child in the home, or they are the perpetrator, they've one who's seriously assaulted somebody else, that's serious. Serious complaints against the service. It's really important that children feel able to make a complaint about us if need be. That's one of the ways we learn is when they make complaints. And it's okay to get complaints. It's what you do about it. But if it's a serious one, so for example, from an Ofsted report I read this morning, that doesn't define serious though, isn't this subjective? Exactly. I know what you mean, Hayley, because this is part of the reason why there are so many confusions around serious notifications. Should we go through the list and then we'll have a talk about it? Because I think it'd be good for everybody to talk about how they see serious. So, yes, thank you. So with serious illness or accident, and that's the problem. They've put the word serious at the front of everything, and it's your serious might be different to mine. Serious incident of self-harm, serious concerns of a child's missing behaviour, particularly where the child is considered to be of grave risk due to age or vulnerability, or where they've been missing for a considerable period of time and their whereabouts is unknown. Okay, I think it's over to you time now. Who wants to come in first? I don't know how to actually stop all of these. Can I do that? Yeah. So I can see people. Hayley, do you want to lead then? What do you see as serious? Do you want to put your mic on and come in first?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I think what I've found in the past is so previous Ofsted inspections have kind of highlighted to me that the notifications that I was making were too many or not deemed to be a notification. And then another Ofsted inspector was saying another time, why haven't you reported this? Why didn't you notify this? And I have given an explanation and said, so for example, a self-harm incident where a child has routinely got a history of self-harm, it's a regular occurrence, and where I might have notified on, say, for example, if they've just moved in, I'd notify the first kind of self-harm incident, but then not notify on another because it's something that we're dealing with every day. I've then been challenged about why I haven't, and that's gone against me. And it feels really unfair at the time because it's not explicit. It doesn't say you need to do every one. In fact, it seems to give you the ability to make that decision as a manager about whether or not it's serious or not. And I think the reason they end up with too many notifications is there's a real fear from managers about the impact of an Ofsted inspector not seeing it in the same way as you. So someone has said to me, oh, an Ofsted inspector said, if in doubt, do it, whereas and so it's really it does leave you really vulnerable, I think, as a manager to make that decision.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially as what can happen as well, although Ofsted inspectors do inspect without fear or favour, and they're completely impartial. They do have their own slant. Every inspector has their own slant. So that can make it a lot more difficult deciding what is serious and what isn't. Hi, Hayley. Good. One of the suggestions I can give you is when they first move in and it's a self-harm, I would say in there, in the notification, we know this is going to be a regular pattern because of who this, what this child is. This is part of their behaviour support plan and risk assessment that we have notified you. Do you want further notifications in this format, or shall we email you? So that it's putting they might say, oh, it's up to you to make the decision, but you've had mixed messages from two different inspectors. And that confuses things, doesn't it?
Very much, yeah.
I would always say, if in doubt, notify, because it's better that they know than they don't know. We're going to come into why it's really important that they do know. So if in doubt, always notify. If it's on the cusp, should they know, shouldn't they know? If your gut feel is saying, I'm not really sure, then do it. Tony, what was it?
Hello,
Hi.
my name's David. I'm
Oh,
with
hi,
Tony.
David. Sorry.
We're together on the same screen.
Hi, David.
Hi. It was just sort of to follow up on that because there's just a couple of things that come to my mind when thinking about, I guess, the weighting when considering like the perspective and the information that different people have available to make a judgment regarding the suitability of a Reg 40. Because I think it's also important to be mindful of the fact that an Ofsted inspector coming into a home is reading a narrative that has been written about an incident, wasn't necessarily part of that incident, and so may place subjective weight on areas that were not necessarily reflected by the people that were on the ground dealing with that issue as it was happening.
Yeah.
And I think this is the challenge, is that I think, like, as you mentioned right at the beginning, the sort of guidance around Reg 40 was amended in 2023 because there was Ofsted recognised that there was a concern that there were so many notifications that you essentially then dilute your ability to be able to focus on the most serious ones. But then I think from when thinking about, you know, ongoing risk management for very sort of complex traumatized children, we know that there is so much nuance within this world in terms of the interpretation of behaviors as well as the functionality of different behaviors that can actually help you understand a lot more about what's driving the child in that specific situation. But then, and I understand what you sort of reflected in the, you know, sort of when in doubt, refer. And I think that's kind of it feels like that's the golden rule. But then I guess if an Ofsted inspector does come and said, well, you're sending too many, like it almost makes it, from the provider's point of view, it's like, well, I don't really feel comfortable taking that advice because of the possibility that the next inspector might say something completely different, you know. So it feels like it doesn't actually, if the goal of the 2023 review was to reduce the number of Reg 40s, I'm unsure how that can be achieved if the rule is when in doubt, send it anyway. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I do. And Linton put in the chat, I'm not sure where you are, Linton, are you top left of my screen? It's easy to explain why you've sent a 40 than why you haven't. But Martin has said also then you get a change of inspector and get criticised for notifying or not. Does not seem any consistency from Ofsted when they require us to be. And I really can relate to, I mean, I left Ofsted 7 years ago now when I retired, and came to I've been working with a couple of groups of children's homes, and the same thing. One of my homes now, 7 years, had a different inspector every year. And that is really difficult because how can you then really demonstrate the progress that you want to demonstrate because they can't see how you've moved on. And I do appreciate that. This is part of the reason why I'm saying really clearly, when you do your evaluation as the manager, when you're sending it in, say in there why you've deemed that this is serious enough to notify them. And they cannot then say, because part of the reason why they're saying that they were really frustrated with too many notifications coming in, because that they were arguing that managers should be able to decide whether something is serious or not. But like in Hayley's position, it could be an Ofsted inspector who's never dealt with self-harm. So they don't really understand it. They don't understand this is part of this child's being, this is part of who they are, until they've been able to move through that. And so it freaks them out, you know, it frightens them. And so in that case, if you say really clearly in your evaluation why I've notified, this is why I consider this incident to be serious. Then if they come and they say, well, why did, you know, I didn't need to know about that. And you can, for you as well, you've got the reminder there as to why you did it. Because your point, David, about they just read that blank. And when you look at all of the things you deal with day in and day out, you might not remember all the nuances of that day.
No.
So you might not be able to
Precisely.
explain it to them. So, but if you've got that written down, this is why I've done, and it doesn't have to be War and Peace. I'm coming to that in a minute. Just, I've done this because this is different. Sorry, sorry, has somebody else got a point? Hayley, yes, totally, Martin. We've had 3 different. Yeah. Is that clear? I mean, I can't tell you definitely not to, definitely do it or definitely not to. But if you can say why you've done it, they can't challenge you on that because you're really clear.
Could I ask a follow-up question on that, please?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so because I guess I think that's really, really helpful advice. So thank you. But I'm just curious, like the point that Hayley raised about the almost like the differential perspectives of different inspectors. Would it be possible within your evaluation of the incident when reporting it to state, we understand that this is, say it's self-harm is the context, right? That we understand that this is a part of this young person's presentation and, a primary coping behaviour that they've engaged in for many years, etc., etc. However, I'm submitting this Reg 40 due to differential opinions from Ofsted inspectors about the suitability. Can you not say that? But that's the experience, right?
It is, yes, but what I would say is that you could say that my previous Ofsted inspector asked for this information, which is why I'm putting it in. But I would be really careful because that is a formal document that if, heaven forbid, there was ever a serious case review, that would be lifted and that would be read and that would form part of the evidence if there was a serious case review. And if it looked like you were in conflict in any way with your Ofsted inspector, that might not be helpful. What you could do is send them an email to say, okay, I'm confused. My previous inspector didn't want this and you do, or my previous inspector did want this and you do. Which is it? And get your response in writing and keep that. Leadership and management, I love that. On the side of mentor, you can put in there email with Ofsted on this date to clarify, and that's in there then, and you've got that's part of your evidence moving forward. That can be picked up by your Reg 44 visitor, can be picked up by your RI, can be picked up by your directors. Whoever is supervising you can see that you've taken that action further, and you've got clarity then from that particular inspector how much they want it.
That's really helpful, thank you.
Okay, is that Rachel?
Yes, I was just wondering, because I think what we're struggling here is what I might be struggling with is the definition of the word of serious and what that means. And surely that has to be looked at in the context of the child and their history and their behaviour and their risk. Sorry, I'm outside. I'm just trying to be somewhere quiet. I am listening intently. So I'm just wondering, would it be possible when you meet your inspector for the first time to agree with them for the child in question or any of the children in the home, I suppose, what serious actually means in regards to that child and those behaviours? Because you might have somebody who self-harms every day. They might cut themselves superficial cuts every day, but then one day they do something slightly more serious that's a change in the behaviour, that's an escalation in the behaviour. And so would it be possible to agree with an inspector what serious looks like for each individual child?
No, because the inspector will feel that you're using them to help make your professional decisions, and that's not their role, they're the regulator. But in that instance, what I would do is put that in their risk assessment and say really clearly, these are the patterns. If, however, there is an escalation, if there is a change, if you notice something is different or they're accessing different websites, that kind of thing, you will take other action, and that can include notifying Ofsted. I mean, before you notify Ofsted, I would be talking to CAMS, any other therapists that's involved with the child, but you could make that as part of your risk assessment so that you're identifying the risk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, clearly we would be the ones alongside any other professionals who would be defining what serious is. I suppose it's just making sure your inspector is happy with that that we will notify you when things change from what is essentially a baseline of behaviour that we've
which
got
is
under
why you put it
control,
in
we're
your risk
managing
assessment.
with the other
Yeah.
professionals, blah blah blah. But if anything escalates, then we will notify you of, because that would be a red 40 for us. That would be an alarm bell for us, and therefore we would notify you.
So making that
It's
clear.
a bit like the child sexual exploitation in the sense that we have a lot of children who, there are a lot of concerns about child exploitation, but we haven't got any clear evidence. There aren't people coming to pick them up in cars, but do we have to notify Ofsted every time they come home with an extra £50 in their pocket? Is that something that they do want to hear?
Listen,
about?
if a child came home with an extra £50 in their pocket, I would want to know.
Right. Okay.
Fine. If they came home with 50p, or sort of been out maybe with their mates and had a few to drink and so on, I wouldn't necessarily be that worried. But if they came home with an extra £50, I would want to know where that came from, how they got it, linking in with that. So that's definitely one to share. Martin, yeah. Are you all able to read these messages? You're welcome, Rachel. Are you all able to read these messages that pop up?
Yeah.
You are? Okay, so I don't need to read them. You must think, why should I read them out to you? Thank you, Martin, you're right. If you leave it until the inspector comes to try and clarify something on the day, particularly around that, they'll think that you're not managing all through the time, and you are. The fact that you're here and you've bothered to come to this training says a lot about how committed you are to trying to clarify getting this right. And it is difficult. I used to manage a childcare team, and one of my friends managed a child protection team in a different part of the city. This was up in East Yorkshire. And her threshold for what was safeguarding was much higher than mine. Her definition of serious, because she'd been doing it for many, many more years than I had at that time. I'd come out of working in the drugs world for years, gone back into working with children. I was managing this team. My threshold was here. My colleagues was here. And we used to have major battles about it because it's what you're kind of used to. And so serious is a word just open to so many interpretations, which is why I always say use your risk assessments, use your care planning, make sure it's recorded really clearly in there. Okay, Joel, find out if you don't know where that £50 is coming from, I would put that together with maybe other concerns that you have around a child. You wouldn't automatically notify, but if a child is regularly coming home with extra money and they've got extra, where have they got the £50 from? Professional curiosity, check that out. Yeah, you're right, Tony. There is different knowledge. Hayley?
Oh yeah, just because we're talking about the exploitation issue, I guess something very recent has occurred, and I'm holding it in my mind and thinking about the possible concerns, and I haven't notified Ofsted. This is only yesterday, but I wonder. For my part, I felt like I needed more evidence than just my kind of suspicion or like a little red flag, like I wonder why that's. Well, I wonder why he's asked that. So a child has asked his dad for £100 and said it's for food. He wants them to get him food because we don't feed him properly, which. But there we go. So I've spoken to Dad and I've said, listen, that's really interesting. Can I just check that you haven't given him £100? And he said, no, I haven't. And I said, because my worry would be that if it's not for food, it might be for something else. It might be a different thing. So that's not a lot to go on. And we've got a plan. Do I need to notify that?
No. You've taken action right away. You're exploring it to look what's happening.
Forward.
Is he a sort of your mind would be ticking over, is he a substance misuser? Is he wanting to buy an e-bike? Could be anything. So until you've got more, but it could also be, does dad love me enough to give me this money? If I tell him I'm hungry, does he love me? Is he going to give me money for food, or is he going to,
Yeah, and obviously the conversation with dad has been, right, because dad is brilliant and said, we will find someone, because it's a cultural thing. He's saying that we're not, he wants different food to what we're eating, even though we're trying to make sure that he has the right stuff. And dad is like, well, I'll solve that problem by bringing him food every day, or getting someone to bring it in rather than giving him cash. So my plan is with dad is, if he's still saying he needs £100, we need to be thinking about what that's for and why.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you record that as such, and you can, if you want to be sort of doubly sure, because it's saying about discrepancies due to different knowledge and so on, you could actually be recording in your evaluation, have decided not to inform Ofsted at this point because there's no, there's nothing to tell them. If the matter escalates in X way, if your discovery wants it to run away or something, we will do. This is where your evaluations are so key, because you can make those points in your evaluations. It shows you've thought about it, but not necessarily done it. And Tony, you're right. There is different levels of knowledge and experience and so on. My threshold might be higher now. It's, gosh, that was 2000. 2000 that I was doing that. Things change, don't they, over sort of 26 years, but it's people's knowledge, it's people's experience, and they put that into being, and that's where serious, using that word, it's a loose word. I'll be honest with you, even though we're being recorded, when we were first told to use that word back when I was still inspecting, it was like, what does that mean? Because serious is different. It's a different word for everybody. So moving on. So it's not an exhaustive, then we looked, it's not an exhaustive list, and you must assess each case individually, taking into account any patterns of behaviour or unusual behaviour that may indicate an increased risk to the child, which is what we've just said, isn't it? So serious notifications. We've talked about this in detail, but the highest volume is in that grey area where people don't really know. A big one is incident requiring police involvement. We contact the police if a child goes missing, but we don't have to tell Ofsted every time. If we think the child really is at risk, and your children, you're the ones who are on the ground, you're in there every day, spending time with them, you build your relationship with them. Ofsted don't. They are a nameless, faceless person at the end of, a line, or sort of on a computer screen, apart from when they... Pardon? Or somebody just reading something cold that you send, them, so if things change. The line between what is serious and what's not can be blurred, and it's always a matter of judgments, and it depends on all the different things we've said here. And some of this has been lifted from Ofsted guidance, and some is just from experience. The age of the child, frequency of the incident, any injuries sustained, any additional needs the child has, the context of the home, and so on. There's so many different things. But in some instances, the cumulative effect of frequent incidents may make a notification appropriate, even if in isolation each event would not warrant this. And that links, Hayley, with what you're saying about your lad. You don't need to notify that. But if there are other things that become cumulative and you're concerned about them and they add up, then maybe. But if you're using, for example, on Mentor, there's that behaviours section, depending on which level of Mentor that you've got. In health and well-being, you can record behaviours in there, and it will give you a chart, and it will show you if behaviours are changing. So if you pick up, oh, hang on, every Thursday, and you might not normally have picked it up, or a Thursday and a Tuesday, and it starts to sort of pick up those patterns for you, that will help you make your mind up. And obviously, talking to colleagues, talking with each other, talking it through with a social worker very often. Have you noticed, have they said something to you? You don't have to make those decisions in isolation. You don't have to say to the social worker, should I tell Ofsted? But this is an increase. Child missing from home. When the police are called, it's often because a child has gone missing, not because they've been involved in a crime. And again, Ofsted, they don't need to routinely know that children are going missing, even if the police are called to help to look out for them. And it's important that you do call the police when they're missing as part of what you should be doing, but you don't have to tell Ofsted every time. But there are exceptions. If the child is at grave risk due to age or vulnerability, and that's linked with CSE, CCE, those kind of risks that are around, if they've been missing for a considerable period of time and the home doesn't know where they are, because often when our children are missing, we know they're around a mate's house, aren't they? They just haven't come home. Or they might be at mum's house or grandma's, but they haven't complied with what they should be doing coming home. We still have to report them, but Ofsted don't need to know that. But if we've got no idea where they are and you've got real concerns about them, that's when you make it a Reg 40. So timescales and quality, we've already covered some of this, but I've deliberately repeated it because of how I put myself for a little bit in Ofsted shoes again, what it's like when they get the reports in, they get the 40s in. The purpose of a Regulation 40 is to ensure that Ofsted and other agencies are notified of significant events. So Reg 40 itself states the registered person must, without delay, clearly a notification concerning a child's death should be without delay. However, you should take a proportionate approach towards other incidents and the time frame of notifying Ofsted. It may be that you need sufficient time to collect further information before you consider it to be an incident serious enough for a notification. And that's bringing in your cumulative things. It's looking at where there have been perhaps a pattern and maybe the pattern has changed. You've got a number of things coming together, like the lassie that came home with £50, you wouldn't automatically notify that, the one-off. But I'd be looking at that, where did the £50 come from? Are there any other indicators that show to you that you're a bit concerned about the child? Could it be that they've suddenly changed their friendship group? Could it be that they've suddenly started going to a different place? Are they suddenly secretive about what is on their phone or what games they're doing, they may be playing? Are they suddenly changing their interests and they don't want to be involved in this anymore? I'm thinking of a lass who used to be really involved in things in the house, doing activities, with the other kids in the house and the staff, and enjoyed that kind of thing. And all of a sudden, she was like, too young for me. I don't want to be doing that. And it wasn't just her maturing to the next stage. It was she had these older friends that she wanted to be with, and she saw what was happening in the home as childish, and she was separating herself off. So if you start adding those things together, there's your cumulative effect. They're the things you're worried about. I still would want to know where the £50 came from. So the quality and content of reports under Reg 40 vary considerably, and managers and providers are responsible for the quality of the reports completed by their staff. So if you do allow your staff to write them, if you do encourage them, say to do it on a Saturday night if they have a concern, you're responsible for ensuring the quality is good enough so that the Ofsted inspector has the question, So when you come in on Monday, check it, double check it, and make sure it's clear and it tells you the story. So if it tells you the story, it will tell Ofsted the story. Vital information, especially the action taken, is often missed from the notification. That often happens with staff when they think, oh, there's been a fight, or they've come home, they were missing all night and they've only just come in. I need to do a notification because they don't fully understand it. and they'll do the top bit. This is what's happened. This was who's there. Click, send the button, and it's gone. But they missed the bottom bit. What were the actions that were taken? That's where you come in, because you're the ones who can evaluate as what has happened, make it clear what should be happening or not happening, and what's happening next. So I've repeated this. Notification should be evaluative and not merely a chronology of events. So what do inspectors need to know from a notification? They need a brief summary of the event. Brief is very important. Inspectors don't want to read War and Peace and how wonderful you've been. They want to know what happened then, now, and what you're going to do about it. And very, very often I've seen notifications where the whole incident log, the missing log, including all of the contacts and everything, is all attached with no actual other information. So the inspector's got to plough their way through all of that to actually get at what's been happening and what you're doing about it. So what was the incident? The actions taken by staff and managers at the time, the impact on the child, young person, that's really, really important, that impact on that child. Further actions planned to reduce the likelihood of a similar incident occurring again. And the reason why we need to do this is because Ofsted need to be reassured as the regulator that the matter is being appropriately managed. They don't want it left up out there in the ether because you don't know what to do. They want to know that you do know what to do, and this is what you're doing, why, and what you're hoping to come from that. I'm sure that all of you know how to do that, and you're already doing that. And I'm sorry if I'm sort of repeating stuff, but I think it helps sometimes to just, this is why they want to know. I don't know if you've noticed that if there has been an issue in a children's home or there's been a major situation, very, very often Ofsted is slated in the press. And it's something they do not like. Their managers do not like. And it puts, they're always having to answer for themselves. And it puts a lot of pressure on individual inspectors as well. So, for example, an incident requiring police intervention, police involvement occurs in relation to a child which you consider to be serious. So they know not. Ofsted know that notifications about police call-outs to the home can tell them a lot about what's happening to children and what's happening in children's homes. And they will be conscious of the national protocol on reducing criminalisation of looked after children. And the reason why I've put this in, and the next few slides are following on from what we've talked about around Reg 40s, is because this protocol has been updated, and Josh McAllister is in the process of putting this more into action. And there's been a lot of stuff on social media around this. So it's really important that we were able to look at it in more detail. How many of you knew about the National Protocol on Reducing Criminalisation of Looked After Children anyway? Even the first one, the original. Yeah, there's a few nods. Anyone else? No, quite a few shaking of heads as well. So Ofsted are aware, inspectors are aware, and what they look at is they'll be looking at why have you called the police when when they're reviewing notifications, and they will look at that with you as part of your inspection. So they will want to know, why are you using the police for behaviour management? Are staff using the police because they're scared? So they'll be looking at that as part of their Reg 40 monitoring. And it doesn't just happen in the individual inspectors when it comes into you, because it goes into that central point. The kind of notification can be picked out by the computer system and looked at. So that's how Ofsted get their figures and their graphs, and they look at their research and their points, is from a lot of this information that comes in from notifications. And there have been regular discussions on social media with contributions by children and police officers about staff in children's homes criminalising young people. And Ofsted is saying the police should not be used for low-level behaviour management or matters a reasonable parent would not have called the police over. So that's what we're going to segue into now. Before we get there, are there any other direct points on Reg 40s, Reg 27s that you want to ask about, that you're not sure about, that you want to share with each other? You know, if you've got some really good practice that you can share with everybody else, that'd be great. No? Okay then. So, NB, this is part of the reason why I've done this, okay? The National Protocol on Reducing Criminalisation of Looked After Children is being updated as part of the new white paper published by the government in May. And so what I've done is I've lifted the new information. There is a link to this when you get the slides, one of those hyperlink, you know, the blue things you get on a slide that you can click into so you can get a copy of the new version. And that's tied in with the government looking at the concerns around criminalisation of young people that have been looked after and care leavers. So it's all tied in with that at the moment, and that's why I've segued them across. So what now? What do you think? Is there a risk of children in care becoming over-criminalised? Anyone? Yeah, there's nodding. I can see lots of nodding. Hayley and Tony?
I'm kind of going to say a quick yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a quick yes. It's very relevant to me at this current point in time. And the difficulty is, how do you support your staff member who may have felt that something was beyond their window of tolerance, I guess, in terms of behaviour, and that requires police intervention, when as a manager I disagree with that choice or that opinion, and also with my knowledge of, you know, our statement of purpose that says we are looking after children with, you know, severe trauma and behaviours that go alongside that trauma that we are dealing with day to day. And there's an expectation that we need to be a bit more resilient. So it's just that challenge, really.
Yeah.
I think it's lessened in my experience of managing. I think people are being generally much more therapeutic and understanding of the difficulties that young people have. Certainly in my home, like, there's been so many occasions where there's been discussions about, does this warrant? And it's like, no, actually it doesn't. This is all part of the trauma. We need to make sure that we go through this with them. We're not going to criminalise the young people, but it does raise conversations and feelings, I guess, in staff around how supported they are when they're struggling.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop talking and let other people talk now.
No, thank you, Hayley. Martin
You're welcome.
and Linton, can I ask you to speak? Because then we can sort of say, Martin, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think, as Hayley says, we've got a sense of protection, but there is a fine line between protection and overprotection, because the reality of the real world is they can get too much rope, whereas my children, other children not in the system, would have far more severe consequences, but then gives a false sense of reality to the real world and consequences for your actions.
Yeah. Linton?
Yeah. In my experience, there's been a situation where we've had a young man regularly verbally abusing police officers, trying to physically assault them. And it must have happened 4 or 5, maybe even 6 times. And there's never been any consequences for him. And I just think it doesn't need to be extreme consequences, but it needs to be more than just you can't do that. Otherwise, he's going into the world as an adult, and things are going to drastically change. It's a difficult one because, like we say, we don't want to criminalise, but at the same time, we need to educate them on the real world and make sure that they're going to be a valued member of society and not looked down upon because of their attitude to life and expecting to get away with these things.
I hear that completely. One of my concerns,
It's
David.
a balance, isn't it?
Yeah. David, is it David or Tony? It's David.
It is David, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. That's all right.
No, I think everyone's made really, really valid points. I wanted to just share a little bit of professional experience because in a past professional life, I worked for sort of 4 or 5 years as a mental health liaison social worker within youth offending teams.
Wow.
And I can say sort of quite confidently, one, there was a massively disproportionate representation of looked after children that were held under those teams. But I think sometimes, and I think it's really, really understandable that when you see very concerning behaviour, which from a societal point of view would normally be dealt with by the criminal justice system, there's a real level of anxiety about when this child goes out into that world and potentially continues that behaviour, they will find themselves in that system regardless anyway. And I think that that's a very valid perspective to hold, and I think that a lot of people can empathise with that position. I think just as a sort of a devil's advocate sort of position to that is that I think there's quite a lot of evidence to suggest that premature contact with the criminal justice system increases the risk of further involvement with the criminal justice system further down the line. And I saw this quite often where you would have young people that were externalizing a lot of distress, or as looked after children who really don't have a sense of belonging because of their formative experiences, are seeking that belonging through communities that are quite dangerous. But then how involvement in the criminal justice system can have a really big knock-on effect. So like a young person who's, say, approaching their transition age is going to have a number of less options of like transition housing, and then gets placed in an environment which is really unsuitable. Like I remember working with a young person who was 17 and was pulled through the criminal justice system as a looked after child, and the only place that he could actually live because of the risks that had been deemed as a result of that criminal history was literally in a block of flats filled with drug users. And then he immediately is in this environment as a 17-year-old and in those circles of people, and his life chances essentially just dropped off a cliff as soon as he left care, because he was placed in the lion's den of some of the worst offenders in the local area because of the fact that was the only place that he could go. So it is like, I think both perspectives are really valid, but I think the situation is a lot more complex, and it's also what young people are exposed to as they continue to sort of have to navigate their young adult life, trailing behind them this criminal record, which prevents their opportunities to get into employment, education, housing, and all of those sorts of things, which can increase the risk of further criminalisation. So it's not to devalidate the concern, because I think that's really, really valid, and that we're wanting to set people up with an awareness of what the systems are like outside of care. But I think the picture's also really, really complicated at the same time.
Thank you.
But yeah, sorry, I'll stop.
That's all right. Linton.
Yeah, sorry. This is slightly off topic, but I think it's still relevant. I think when our children are growing up, our children in care, I think we have a little bit too much expectation on them to develop their independence and to become young adults sooner than we would with our own children.
Absolutely.
And I just think it's really important to ensure that we educate and care for our young people more than we set them up for independence. And I think that's where there's a little bit of a gap in the social care system at the moment, where we're trying to develop them a lot sooner than we ordinarily would with our own children. And I think the love, the care, and the education that we give them is actually more important than their independence, because they could develop that at a later stage. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring that to the table, really.
Thank you. I just want to make a point, then I'll come to you, Hayley. I always worried I've been doing this kind of stuff. I started working in children's home in 1975 for Camden Social Services. So I've been kind of around a long time and seen a lot of things change over the years. One of my fears it's not, I don't want any of our kids to get drawn into criminal justice system too soon, or ever, if possible. And one of my fears, if we kind of let some behaviours go, isn't that they're going to get arrested at a later time. My big fear is that if we allow them sometimes to be kind of the bully in the house, pushing things, because that's how they are feeling with themselves and they're showing that, is that when they go out there into the real world, as it were, some person who's nastier than them, because they're not actually a nasty kid, they're a kid that's scared and is just sort of showing things, is going to smack them. I don't want them to be at risk of being assaulted when they go out because of this is how they talk to people and they're getting away with it. So a big part of what we should be doing is helping them to love, as you're saying, Leiden, and having that way of building that resilience, which is tied in as well with what you're saying, David, so that they can really like themselves and they know how to then explain who they are, rather than risk not just getting arrested, but somebody nastier than them hurting them. Hayley.
Yeah, just on the back of what Linton and David and yourself have said, I totally agree with all of those points. And that's often what I hear, or the worry from staff, is if they don't get the consequence of like the police, and how they're going to learn. But I think we're seeing the children that we are looking after are in a place of safety with us, and they're incredibly traumatized, and they're showing that in their behavior. And it's our job to make sure that they remain safe in the home, and that we do the work with them so that they understand their reactions and their emotions, and how that might be, well, firstly, to help them find a different way to communicate and understand themselves, so that they can then manage difficult situations in the community later on. But I don't think we should panic and go, this behaviour is happening, we must do something to show them that it's not okay, and go down the police route, because that will just alienate them further from us and the people that need to be protecting them, and drive them out towards people that are unsafe. They need to feel protected.
We may get 300 pieces of paper telling us what that child's life was before they came to us. We don't actually know, and we don't actually know how it felt. We don't know how people spoke to them, spoke around them, what was going on around them before they came into us. So that could be their learned response anyway. And it's about helping them find their own way of communicating. If we sort of look into, I'm not going to ask people to sort of share these bits now unless you want to, but it would be, so what now when involving the police? I was going to ask, when was the last time you called the police to your home? Why? When would you contact the police regarding an incident in the home? What I do with these presentations is every single one of them is written in a way that what I hope you do as managers, RIs, I don't know any of your roles, status, anything, that you take these back to your teams and use the bits in there to do training with them. Because this gives them a chance to understand some of these points that you're all making so clearly, and will help your staff to look at that. Because it's back to what we were saying earlier about sort of thresholds, if you like, and what constitutes serious. I read an incident report that somebody had sent in, a member of staff, and she wrote that a young person glared down the stairs at her. I was like, what? How has this? And because of her interpretation of this child glaring down the stairs at her, it had all built up into this sort of major scene that needn't have happened. Grow up. But it's how some people then interpret what the child looks like. This particular child had all sorts of bowel and bladder issues, and he'd come out of his room because he wanted to get to the bathroom because he'd had an accident, and was like mortified by this whole thing. She'd called him for something and he'd glared down the stairs at her and ignored her. Well, of course he had. He wanted to go to the loo, but she had made it this big thing. So it's about looking at some of these points with our staff helps educate them so that they can understand and look at their bits are. So one of the points is, do you put police involvement in individual behaviour management plans? So with some of the young people you're working with, if you feel that their behaviour may escalate to a point where they're a risk to other children in the home, themselves or staff, and you feel if it goes beyond the red, and I'm really concerned about this, then we can call the old bill, put it in there. So that it's clear for staff as well. I'm not saying you have to do it every time. Don't say to staff, you have to do it every time. But if they feel that is the case, that gives them some reassurance as well as to, yeah, okay, you don't then have to press charges, but it might help, but don't use them as your behaviour management technique. And that's one of the things Ofsted do pick up on, that if staff cannot control a situation and can't control young people's behaviour and they're phoning the police all the time to come in and calm things down, that's going to lead to concerns and at the very least requires improvement. So it's looking at why you're doing it. Which is the next point. Is there a risk of the police being used to manage young people for us on occasion? I don't think that's the case with any of you. I really don't, from everything everybody has said, the points that are coming up. Thank you, Maureen. I can see your point. All these things that are there, I can see that. But we do know, don't we, that there are some homes where they do. Things have got out of control, and staff, because it's so difficult sometimes to have a consistent staff team. So if you have a staff team that isn't consistent or very experienced, or you're having to run on too many agency, there's no manager there at the time, anything like that, there could be issues where they don't know what to do, so they'll they'll phone the police all the time. It's about being conscious of that. Why are you doing it? So question, and this is one of the things that would come up in a Reg 40, they would question that, why did you phone the police? But because you're all going to do really good evaluations, you're going to say why, aren't you? And then that question's already answered before they come, and it saves you so much stress. So now these are dead easy for me to say. They're smaller. I'm going to go through them sort of point by point. These are some of the points that have come out in the new protocol that is going to be really clear. That is again in the bit at the end. These are considerations which should underpin the responses to an incident, and that's in the protocol. I've lifted them out for you, so it'll save you time. Always working to diffuse and or de-escalate as a first response. Will you do that? I know, but it's in there. Understanding the emerging incident from the perspective of a child or young person's experience. Was there a trigger or underlying stressor contributing? For example, something surrounding family contact or Christmas approaching. Anything like that could be a real trigger for our child. I nearly said his name. The example of the lad at the top of the stairs who needed to go to the bathroom because it's a trigger, that could have got really, really messy. Oh gosh, in both contexts of the word. But it's sort of, the real concern is though, it's understanding those triggers. The nature and seriousness of the allegation or incident, including any action against a victim. Wishes and best interest of the victim. Previous incidents of a similar nature by the same child or young person. Previous relationship between the victim and perpetrator. So this is the technology that is in the documents. It's not the it's not the terminology I use, but it's what was in there. previous behaviour or offending, and any bullying, peer pressure, duress. You can have that in a home. You can have it in your family home, can't you, with siblings? I'm the oldest of 3 girls, and my next sister down and I hated each other as teenagers. When I got into my 30s, I realised what a nice girl she was, and why hadn't I noticed it all those years before, you know? And that happens in families. It happens in our family homes as well, in our homes where our children become our family. Whether the child or young person is, or there is reason to believe they may be, a victim of criminal exploitation, having been coerced to undertake the criminal activity, including by traffickers. And it's making sure we look at that. I don't know if you know, but I'm sure you all do. Trafficking can take many, many forms, and a lot of our children end up in our care because they've been trafficked into the country and different things. I've recently discovered, because I've been running some training this week on Refugee Week. I teach English to refugees, and I've been doing some work to try and sort of get some support and funds. Mo Salah, his name wasn't Mo Salah when he was brought here when he was 9. He was trafficked here as a child labourer at the age of 9, and he was given the name of Mohammed Salah when he was placed where he was working, rather than his real name, so that the authorities didn't discover who he was really. And he went on from there to do the things that he's done, and he's now British, and he kept the name Mohammed Salah because he didn't remember who he was before because he was 9.
Mo Farah or Mohammed Salah?
Mo Farah. Sorry, I was watching the football last night. You can tell, can't you? Mo Farah, Sir Mo Farah, our runner. Thanks, Liam. But so trafficking takes many forms and things, and we don't know with a lot of our children what their early experiences were. So something may trigger for them. It could be the smell of coffee. It could be the smell of something cooking. Hayley, your point about food. Food is so triggering in a lot of ways, can't it? It can be really comforting, but it can also make us feel bad. So it's looking at those points, isn't it? Making sure we're clear on those. And the following considerations as well that they're asking us to look at in line with this is provision of mental health services prior to the incident, and if there's been good engagement from the child or young person. That ties in with your experience, doesn't it, David? That if that support is there, have they had engagement? Are they getting the support? Is it actually making a difference for them? Probability of a repeat incident, the legal value of damage caused, lead up to the incident, including whether there may have been provocation. The incident I was telling you about with the glaring down the stairs, if that young person had come down the stairs and really had a go at that member of staff, I wouldn't have blamed him, because there was no need for that sort of triggering there. There was no need for taking offence at him looking down at her. With the consent of the victim, can alternative courses such as restorative approaches be appropriately used? So can you do all of that before you even think of phoning the police? And finally, would I have called the police if this were my own child? And that's always a question to ask yourself. And that tied in with what all of you were saying there, sort of David and Linton and Martin, and we expect too much of our children because they're looked after, because they come into the homes, and we think, you know, our own kids, what do we say to them? You're treating this house like a hotel. We're still doing their laundry, cooking their meals when they're in their 20s, 30s. So do we expect too much? Would I have called the police if this were my own child? And it's just a really simple question. So the protocol, as I said, on reducing criminalisation is to be strengthened. And again, you will get copies of all of this. So the existing protocol urges local authorities and health and criminal justice partners that they need to all be working together. And this is really pushing that we are all working together, and it comes in with a white paper. It comes in with, because they are trying to reduce the number of residential care facilities and increase kinship care, foster care, keeping families at home. So we know what's happening is that the more complex young people are coming into care at a later age because they've tried all of these things, they haven't worked, so then they accommodate them. And they come into our homes and we love them. But all these things have happened before they get there. So they're going to be looking at tying this up with accountability arrangements and on reducing unnecessary criminalisation based on these principles. That every effort should be made to avoid unnecessary criminalisation, including through preventative services, in recognition of the fact that looked after children's experience can make them vulnerable to youth justice involvement, which is what we said, isn't it? It's what you said, David. You know, it happens so often. All professionals should understand the impact of trauma and abuse on development, particularly on emotional and behaviour development and self-regulation, which is what you've been saying. What is good about this is that they've listened to people that are actually working with our children and pulled these points together instead of somebody in Whitehall just writing it out with the help of AI. They've listened. All professionals should understand the impact of trauma and abuse on development, particularly on emotional behaviour development and self-regulation. I've said that already. Restorative and diversionary approaches should underpin responses to a child's behaviour, whether this occurs in their placement or the wider community. So it's about supporting them, not just our children shouldn't be looked at as pussycats. You know, in the house, perhaps they're all loving and we can stroke them. To get out there and they're tearing birds limb from limb. You know, we're responsible for our children outside as well as at home. So it's about making sure they have the tools, the techniques, the life skills in order to be able to function. Persistent and more serious offending can indicate that the young person has significant unmet needs, and response to offending should recognise this. So what are they missing? You know, what do they need to go out and get? It also states that the police should not be called for low-level behaviour management or matters a reasonable parent would not have called the police over. Really clear on that. And the Ministry of Justice said the government would publish, this is their word, an ambitious refreshed protocol later this year, setting clear expectations of what local agencies should do to prevent unnecessary criminalisation across all care settings. So they've tightened up that protocol. They've tied it in with the white paper on criminalisation of young people and what's happening around the care sector as a whole, and pulled it all together. So we're waiting for that paper to come out sometime this year. So, first of all, time to share. Any questions for anyone? Any burning points that you want to make? Anything that I may have missed? No? So, is there one small change you're going to take back into your practice after today? Anything from anyone? When I do this kind of work in a small group, a management group, or a team meeting group, I go around in a circle and make everybody say something. And you can also, I'm not going to do that here because there's 85 of you here. It would take us a little while. But is there anybody who wants to share? It'd be great if somebody does. One small change.
I think for me, rather than fall on the head of a responsible manager, a registered manager, it might need consultation with the team to look at events, patterns, and their opinion, so you can get a cumulative decision made rather than falling on one set of shoulders, because a lot of responsibility and that's only one set of opinions as well.
You have the final decision though, Martin, if you're the manager, because it's your name above the door.
Yeah, but what you can make that final decision once you've got all the information and different opinions and aspects, different people's views, and might be culturally, might be economically. So it's a shared view, but one person's. It's like a judge, if you like. You have the jury to discuss the information.
Yeah.
And the judge makes the final decision.
Okay. record that, because that's good learning experience for your staff as well, because that helps you look at their thresholds and how they see things.
Yeah, we're all different, aren't we? So again,
Yeah.
the manager is different to the next person down. So we're going to have a difference of opinion and a different response.
Brilliant. Yeah. Geraldine, I'll come to you, Hayley. Geraldine was up and then her hand's gone. Geraldine, are you still there?
Yeah, I am. I just wanted to say, in my experience, I think it's important to understand the traumas that the young people that we look after, just to understand what their history is, because it's all too easy to criminalize the young people. And in my experience, I found that by understanding the young people that we look after, you tend to understand a bit more in terms of their behaviors when they're dysregulated, so much so that you don't rush in to call the police. And one of the young people that we look after, she came to us with 3 different criminal convictions that we had to take her to court for. But as a team, we fought for her to say, look, there's trauma there. Think about the history, her childhood history. Why was she removed? And there's reasons why, as to why she's ended up where she is. And we were able to actually get them removed in totality. So I think in terms of just criminalization and looking after the young people that we also have a duty to just care for them and understand them, and actually giving them a chance to thrive and be, different
Definitely.
adults. I was reading that comment, yeah.
Thank you. Hayley and then Rebecca.
I always forget to turn the mic off.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I think from this session, I am going to be educating the staff about the white paper and the new protocol around the needing to reduce criminalizing young people. I think it's really important that they understand that that's in law, and that in our job we've got a responsibility to make sure that we do everything we can not to criminalize young people. And I think that also, if we haven't already got one, I think I'll be talking to my directors about having a policy in place for staff about this, about not criminalising young people.
Brilliant. And that will help you with that member of staff who clearly wants you to criminalise somebody. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Hayley. Rebecca.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, again, it's taking it back to the staff. I've had an incident here. It was quite. It involved the care of an animal, actually, that was quite a negative outcome, and our staff team, they're no longer with us now. But actually it was quite punitive, their approach. So I think there's an awful lot of learning across the whole sector. Our young person has had over 40 charges previous to being with us and currently with us. So there's a bit of a fine line between the punitive approach to some staff members have with regards to things that happen inside the home, because we're a therapeutic provision, but then there's also the other side of, crimes that happen in the community. So, it'd be quite interesting if there could be another sort of training session on that balance, because I fully understand the trauma and behaviour and things like that, but also there's a real balance of, well, actually we get that, because if we looked at adults who are perpetrators of, let's say, domestic abuse, and they went to court and they said, wow, I suffered childhood trauma, the court would be like, well, that's not a get out jail free card. So it's that balance, isn't it? And it's really difficult for us that are running the homes and supporting these young people. There's, how do we make sure we get that balance right? Not criminalising young people, but actually letting them know that we know all this bad stuff's happened, but actually you can't behave in that way. So yeah, tough jobs we've got.
You have my utmost kind of love and respect, because I couldn't do it anymore. Way too old and tired now. And I look at what you do, and the fact that the regulations are changing all the time, and you get all these new messages all the time, and you get different inspectors all the time, and you've got to juggle that while meeting the needs of your children and your staff.
It's
And
not
then
only that though,
sometimes-
it's the community, it's the community that we live in, the community where we're raising these young people, our relationship with the police force. I sat in a professionals meeting where a police officer was shouting, "You lot aren't supporting us. Why are you letting her get away with this?" And it's like, no, we're trying to get the police to also understand a therapeutic approach. But again, trauma is not a get out of jail free card. And also neighbours, the community, they're not seeing that there's a consequence to any action, because, you know, we've got young people that are living with their biological families going, well, my kids can't act like this. Why are you letting yours? Because, you know, just because they've had trauma. And it's like, yeah. And then obviously then you've got Ofsted inspectors who go, no, can't criminalise young people, but we've got to keep the community happy. So it's a nice harmonious community that we're trying to bring these young people up in.
Yeah. But if you look, and again, those who know me know I really struggle with not being political, but all of the recent demonstrations and things that have been happening, sort of led by some very unpleasant right-wing people, our kids, looked after kids, aren't the ones that have been on those demos. It's kids in the community, but it's our kids are the ones that get the blame and seen the ones that are the worst, if you like, because there's that double standard for our children. So it's about, we do all we can to protect them, and give them the skills that when they go outside, they are able to say no and move on. And that's dead easy for me to say. And I know that. I'm sorry. But well done you for standing up to a, oh good, you're welcome. Well done for standing up to a police officer like that, because they don't understand. And we can't, because of confidentiality, we can't say, but this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened to this child. This is why they're like they are. We can't do it. And that makes it difficult sometimes as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other points for everyone? I'm just having a quick look at the messages. Chris and Naz, magic to see you at the top of the list there. Feel a lot more confident around Reg 40s, found it brilliant listening to other professionals. That's what we want. These sessions are for you. Yeah, I put all the stuff together and hopefully facilitate you talking. It's about you listening to each other as well and learning from each other. Anybody else got any other point they want to take back, they want to share from today? No? Just to let you know, this will come out to you, the recording and the slides with, here we go. Look, all these sources, all the sources with the blue things so that you can tick into them and have a look at them for yourselves if you want to in more detail. Any ideas? Has anybody got any ideas now for what they would like coming up from these sessions? Has anyone got anything burning they want to like put in the chat or email sort of Liam at marketing, or just tell us now? I have got a new one that I don't know if you'd be interested in. It's about, it sounds awful, but it tied him in the 40s. The suicide of two care experienced LGBTQ plus children, young people. One was 17 and one had just turned 18, like a day before, on the transition process for them and the support for them around all of those issues as well, and tied in with self-harming, with some really good lessons that were learned from the serious case review. Would anybody be interested in that one moving forward? Yes. Oh, good. Yes. Okay, so that's one. Yeah. Good. So that is one that we'll maybe look at for. Brilliant. We'll look at that for next time, because the incident happened in 2023, but they've just released it, and I've just sort of put a lot of thoughts in that. Good. Okay. This new Teams thing is really clever. All these things are appearing on their side and everything. All right, that is it. Unless there's any final points from anybody. No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Those who kept saying, oh, I'm talking too much. No, you didn't. Thank you very much, because it really makes the session when it's not just me, when I can see you and when you're coming back with things. So we'll definitely do that as the next one. And thank you all. If you have any queries, just contact marketing and we'll come in with it. Oh, now I've got a session, Hayley, I've got a session that we already did on transition support that might still be available electronically.
Yes, they all are.
Yeah, that you can look at, that we did a couple of months ago.
I'll send it to you, Hayley.
She disappeared, but yeah, we'll send that to you, Hayley. Well, Liam will, because he knows how. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. And it's Senegal, France tonight and England tomorrow. So I'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.